everybody. Thank you, Ileana, and thank you, Julia, for making such a tough act to follow. My name is Kevin Leonard. I run a shop called Leonard Branding and Design in Forest Park, Illinois, and I have been in the industry for 26 years. Before March, I worked for myself, and I also worked full-time at a think tank in the western suburbs, but thanks to COVID-19, that got shut down, and so I'm really trying to ramp up the business and get clients in the door and sort of refresh things here at Leonard Branding and Design. So let's jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, that's not what you guys want to see. Okay. I'll start off by telling you my approach to design is to keep typography the main focus and let that do all the talking. I like interesting typography, and I think that if it's legible, it communicates, and if it communicates, it's doing the job of what good design should be doing. This first project, okay, I'm sorry, hang on just a second, folks. This first project is for the Heartland Institute. The Heartland Institute is a 30-plus-year-old think tank in the western suburbs. It's where I worked before I left. This project took us about 2 years to start and quote unquote complete. I don't think a branding project is ever done, but where I left it was that a lot of the work that you see on the screen now was complete. Some of the pitfalls that we started this project because it was identified that Heartland's brand was fragmented. At the time that I was there, they were using 2 different logos, and they were using them haphazardly with no sort of rhyme or reason. And one of the editors went to a conference, and after 30 years, people were still asking, what is the Heartland Institute? And so we knew we had a problem. From inception to research and discovery and implementation, I was involved in this entire project. I was the creative director at the Heartland Institute. Some of the pitfalls that we faced were that after 30 some odd years, you might imagine that people are change averse, and we knew that we needed to get some buy-in in order to move forward. So from time to time, we would do a temperature check. We would present the work that was ongoing, and the result was easier and easier buy-in. People welcomed us because I worked with editors, I worked with writers, I worked with policy wonks. And so being in the creative side of things at the Heartland Institute sort of made our job a little difficult, but difficult in a fun way. So we have the implementation you hear. It's obvious that there was a stationary system. We did a monument sign, a slew of digital banners and identifiers, and I've also featured the old logo and the new logo here. Part of the problem of the old logo was that it didn't reduce very well, and it just felt old. And based on the research that we did, we discovered that people wanted to see something that felt a little more academic, and that it felt a little more substantial and tried and true. So that is the Heartland Institute. Next, we have Proviso Together. Proviso Together is a civic group here in the Forest Park area that put together a slate of people as candidates for the school board. It needed to be approachable, it needed to be bright and inviting, and I didn't know initially, but it had to span 2 election cycles that were a year apart. So This project began in 2017. It paused in 2018 because the 2017 group got elected, and then it picked up again in 2019. And so this system needed to have some longevity, and it was intentional that we used the same branding from year to year so that voters would know that this is a group that can be trusted and would have the best interest of the students in hand. Great Chefs, another local organization, is a group of people who put on fundraisers, a main fundraiser once a year, to solicit donations and collect funds for scholarships for college, for high school graduates going on to college. Great Chefs needed to legitimize the work that 209 Together was doing, which was who I created Great Chefs for, and it needed to sort of bind everything together so that every time you saw the orange to yellow blend, people knew that they were interacting with the Great Chefs brand and thereby interacting with 209 Together. One thing that was sort of fun was that this system, this brand had to nod towards academia, and it had to nod towards food. And so as you can see in the logo, the design element of a chef's hat, and also a pot with a spoon sticking out of it, and finally a graduation hat to make people know and understand and feel that they were dealing with food and also dealing with academics. United Working Families, the brand system, or the branding system that I developed for United Working Families was started to sort of solve one primary problem, was that their old logo to the upper right-hand corner didn't reduce very well, and it didn't work very well in digital situations. So online, on their blog, it didn't reduce very well. It would get granulated. And so I developed this Uwf system. It was modular. It has a lot of power. It's blocky, so the elements can be moved around, which gave it legs and extended the system. This is a proposed system. It did not get produced because the management at that time was turning over. My contact left the organization, and subsequently they halted the project and they didn't go back to it. But I thought that it was a fun system. I thought that it was strong, and so I wanted to include it in my book. The Brown Cow Ice Cream Parlor. The Brown Cow is a local ice cream parlor that has a following of a lot of people who've lived here for a long time. In neighboring communities, they know about the Brown Cow. The old logo over here on the left in the center, those design elements from the old logo needed to sort of remain in the new brand, because there's a lot of equity in those design elements, there's equity in the colors, and we knew that if we changed it too much, the possibility of alienating the core group of patrons of the Brown Cow could be lost. We didn't want to alienate that group. And so I came up with a more energetic cow. I completely redrew the cow. She's jumping over the moon. She's actually cleared the moon in the design solution that I developed. And I wanted to develop a system that had a logo that could be taken apart and reused and made a wide variety of marks that could be used on anything from cups and hats to the uniform and everything in between. Forest Park Against Racism. Finally, This is the most recent project my studio has worked on. A friend of mine called me shortly after a lot of the global um, protests were going on in the wake of George Floyd's murder by the police. I told him that I would love to be involved, but I wasn't interested in being involved if it meant that we weren't going to get right to some work. Um, Much to my surprise, we got right to it. I needed to develop what you see here, the logo, t-shirts, posters, banners, and flyers in less than 2 weeks and 9 days. And so in those 9 days, we had the bridge blocked off where our peaceful protest took place. The protest was joined by one local elected official and one state elected local official, and it was an incredible success. This was a subject that's very close and near and dear to my heart. And so staying up late working on this project with a team of only about 8 people was a labor of love, and I donated my services to this project. Finally, my approach to presentation is to sometimes scale things um, a little bit larger than they actually are, and sometimes bleed things off the page. I think if you use a mock-up of a guy who needs a shave, that's okay. If you present an ad and the edges are dog-eared, I think that's okay too. You know, I don't want to present perfectly because life isn't perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for showing your work. All right, over to Dan.
Kevin, this is great stuff, man. This is you've been doing this for 26 years. You've been doing this for longer than I have. You know the work is really good. I have two trains of thought, and I would leave it up to you as to which one we should talk about here. One is we could talk about the positioning of the work, right? Talk more about the presentation of the work than the work itself. And then the other is I could give you really, really nitpicky comments about the work itself.
I want to hear all of it, Dan.
All of it. All right. Where should we start in case we run out of time?
I'd like you pick because maybe
Okay, cool.
I could hit you up via email if you have more to say. Right.
Let's talk about the positioning of the work then, because to me, part of the reason that I moved from being a developer to a designer is that I wanted to be part of conversations. Because by the time work got to me, it was too late, and I followed that chain all the way up my career to now I'm a salesperson, because that's where the work happens. It happens in sales. It happens before people even hire you. When they come to your website, when they come to your portfolio, I mean, they're looking for something. And one of the things that struck me about your how you started versus how you ended this presentation is that you changed your language about your work. We started by saying, we do this and we do this and we do this, and the royal we. And then you changed to saying that you did it. And I'm much more compelled by the latter, by you saying, like, this is what I did and this is what I believe. And this is like, because, you know, unless, and let me know if I'm misinterpreting this, I think that that Leonard branding and design is you, right?
That's correct.
So I think that you should come right out and say, I don't think that you need to hide behind the royal we, you know, to make it feel like it's a bigger company or anything like that. I think it's an advantage that it's you doing the work, because your passion comes through, your knowledge comes through, your experience comes through, rather than it, like, when you say we, it feels like a vague machine somewhere that's like, oh yeah, we did this, and it feels less authentic there. So I think that's one thing. Is like I'm much more drawn. You know, I was leaning in when you started to say about the things that you believe and the things that you believe about your work, and I think that that's something that you should lead with.
Okay.
That I think, because when you say you talk more specifically about the work and there's more conviction behind it. When you say we, it makes it more vague. And so even on your first slide, I think you had something that like, we help solve business problems for companies, which I'm like, you know, I read that and I'm like, yeah, like, who doesn't? You know, like, what professional doesn't solve business problems for companies? But what was interesting to me is the mismatch between the words that you said and the words that were on the slide. So the words on the slide said, we help solve business problems for companies, but the words that you said were, I believe in strong typography because it communicates a message. And I'm like, man, that is super. It's much more compelling for you to say, this is what I believe about identity work. This is what I believe about brand systems, is that typography does the heavy lifting. And I think what that'll do, and if you haven't noticed a trend in my comments and feedback, they're really about narrowing, right? They're really about giving people better entryways to you, because I think the mistake that I see a lot of professionals make is that they try to be so broad and cast a wide net and say, no, we do everything for everyone, anytime. And then they don't end up appealing to anyone in particular. So I think that it would be more polarizing, but I think in a good way, if you said, I believe in type-driven logos, it will mean that people who are like, no, but I want an illustration, they might not come to you as much. But I think that the people who are like, yes, I want a type-driven logo, they're going to be your customer. They're going to line up because you believe the same thing that they believe about brand. So that's the part on the positioning part. I'm like, I would lean in more to the fact of who you are and what your beliefs are, and I would put that right up front. And I think that I don't think it gives you any advantages to say we. I think it gives you a lot more advantage to say you, because you're the one doing the work. We're hiring you. Like if I'm going to hire, Leonard, I'm going to be hiring you. And so I want to know what you believe about the work, because if I believe it too, this is going to be a good, strong partnership. Sure. Okay. Last thing I'll say about some of the work and the sticky, which is that I think overall in your work, and I was mentioning this in Ilyana's review too, that or excuse me, in Julia's review, 3, 4, 5 pieces, because then I can start to spot patterns. And there's a pattern that I spot in your work, in that I think that your identity has too many ideas in it. Like your identity work has too many competing ideas. So, chefs feeding college dreams, there's like a pot and pan, and then there's the type, and there's multiple ideas that are competing. And I think if you look at very, very strong identity work, if you look at column champions of design work, like if you look at their work, a Pentagram's work, it's usually there is one strong idea that's communicated by an identity, whether that's like, that might be a color or a typeface or a mark, or something, but the ideas don't compete with each other. And I think in some of your work, the ideas start to compete with each other. Like the type starts to compete with the illustration. And I think it'll tighten it up conceptually if you go, or this brand system is going to be about, change, or this brand system is going to be about, hope, or this brand system is going to be about excitement or about food, I think, and then it kind of draws you to everything should point to that one concept, as opposed to, I think, it's hard to be distracted by all the different ideas. It's hard to kind of say like, well, this logo is about a bunch of different things, but the more you can say, this mark is about this idea, I think you give more strength to the company that you're working with, to your client, to say, I believe that you should believe this thing. I believe that you should talk about how you help college grads, or how you fight racism, or how, like, it's that one idea. And I'm going to create all the materials that help you push one message, rather than a handful of different messages, because then you need different assets and different collateral to support all the different messages, and it gets kind of convoluted.
So capture the idea in the mark, rather than trying to speak to everything that it's about.
Totally. The brown, so like technically your work is great. Like the illustration work is great. The type work is great. I love the brown cow logo. But I don't get that it's about ice cream. I have to I have to see the words ice cream parlor to get it. But instead, this is hard to do, because what amateur designers do that I know that you won't is they'll try to make like an ice cream cone, right? There's like all those tricks that like that usually doesn't go very well. But I think that's the beauty of good branding, is that you can bring an idea, a simple idea, execute it very well, that the message comes very clear. So like, in the brown cow logo, I want to see more ice cream in there somehow. Like the type is beautiful, the illustration work is beautiful, the cow is beautiful, but like, where's the ice cream part? And I think that if the whole logo could say ice cream, then you don't need an ice cream cone. You don't need the other things that are like more tricks, into convincing the viewer about that. So super nitpicky, but I hope that's helpful.
One more minute if there's any last thoughts.
Yeah, Kevin, anything else I can tell you while we're here?
I got nothing, but if you're available to take an email from me, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you have my info, but if not, I'll reach out to you and we can talk.
Thanks for your feedback. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.